There's an old story that's probably not true about how one day Ernest Hemingway was at a bar or a restaurant. There are some inconsistencies with the story, and that while there at the place that he was, he made a $10 bet with some friends or colleagues, or at least other writers, that he could write either the shortest story ever or a 6-word story, which is still pretty short, but again, gotta love those inconsistencies. It is said that Hemingway wowed his audience and won the bet by writing on a napkin the words, "For sale, baby shoes, never worn." Now, almost nobody really seems to believe that Hemingway actually came up with the line on his own, as variations of the same line appear in earlier dated print. However, the drama of Hemingway, one of the most well-known writers who writes novels and short stories, effectively inventing flash fiction, while also being a tall, handsome, muscular, broad-shouldered, brown-eyed, rosy-cheeked, square-jawed, soft-voiced young man, was just too juicy not to turn into an urban myth. And yes, that description came from an actual traditionally published biographical work of Hemingway's life. That line feels eerily like something E. Young Joon would force a writer he'd hired to write his biography to include.
눈부시지 않나?
햇빛이요?
아니. 나한테서 나는 아우라.
Anyway, the story about the baby shoes works as a whole story on its own, not just for what is explicitly stated, but also because of everything that is implied. It might not have traditional story elements like characters or an arc, but with just those 6 words, you have a complete understanding of what happened and, usually, an emotional response to it. Compare this to one of Hemingway's famous novels, For Whom the Bell Tolls, which clocks in at 147,106 words. Or to some of Western Canada's longest well-regarded novels like Gone with the Wind, which jumps up to 418,053 words, or War and Peace, which has a whopping 587,287 words. Stories can be 6 words long, or hundreds of thousands of words long, and both be considered good. Length is merely a tool, something that either helps tell the story on the amount of time needed, or something that either stifles the story or makes it drag on like some new version of torture. For instance, another massive classic is Les Miserables, which is 655,478 words long, all of which I have read. Or well, not exactly because I don't speak French, but I have read a full unabridged translation of the book, and I have to say, it literally took me years to read because the novel is actually about 25% story and 75% what felt like a poli-sci major minoring in architecture's 4 a.m. Tumblr rants on why this one place in France was super important at one time. I mean, yeah, Victor Hugo helped instigate historical preservation and that's great and all, but this was rough to get through, especially as a high school student. And those percentages were generous. And at this point you might be thinking, well, okay, but who cares? I thought I clicked on a video about a K-drama. When do I get to see Park Seo-joon shirtless?
야, 수신료의 가치를 임마.
And the whole reason for that long introduction is because I want to talk for a second about my ever-evolving frustration with the 16-episode constraint of K-dramas. Now, not all K-dramas are 16 episodes, and if we jump over to weekend dramas or historical dramas, that number enlarges drastically with shows ranging from upwards of 40 to 60 episodes. There are also mini-series that are generally only 3 episodes long, but the 16 to 20 episode weekday drama is the more expensive and flashy of the different types of shows, and theoretically, of better quality. They're more akin to American prestige television, with some of the lower budget stuff leveling off with network television quality.
Everyone's favorite housewife, this is Maison!
Go!
My 3rd soldier today. This is how rumors get started.
And weekend dramas veering more towards soap operas than anything else. My issue, though, is that most K-drama lengths are not based on what would be best for the story, but filling out 16 episodes. Most K-dramas that need more time get it, especially if they're popular. Like I said, shows can be extended, and shows that are actually 20 to 24 episodes aren't super uncommon either. Most of the time, if a show feels too short, it's because, for whatever reason, generally to do with ratings, the show gets cut short going from 20 to 16 episodes, or even 16 to 10. You deserved so much better! Generally speaking, though, the issue I tend to come across is that shows are far too long, and while the first half of most shows feel tight or well-paced, the back ends tend to be laced with very obvious filler shots, very obvious scrambles for plot to take up time, or just simply fluff. And I am here to say that I am tired of investing 8 to 12 hours of my life in a show I'm enjoying and maybe even loving, only for that show to expect me to waste my time on multiple extended frowny face shots of the characters struggling with something we already know they're going to work through. And these shots progress nothing. They're literally just chunks of runtime devoted to the actors looking sad, with soaring pop ballads playing in the background. Generally it's at night, and very often there's rain. And it took me a while to figure out that this is why I struggled so hard with completing K-dramas recently, because boy oh boy, is that a thing I am not good at anymore. But after spending nearly a year finishing no K-dramas, granted there are other factors involved, like how long it took me to move past the smile has left your eyes, never forgive, never forget. After finishing 2 recently, both of which I loved, and one of which was one of the most popular K-dramas of 2018, I noticed that, although they are pretty different shows, they both had the same problem. Their runtime was too long, but you couldn't have guessed that until you got to about 12 to 13 episodes in. The less egregious of the two is Love with Flaws.
가까워.
뭐?
너무 가깝다고.
어딜 가. 하던 얘긴 마저 하고 가야지.
그래. 지내보지 뭐.
Which is actually a show with a large cast and, for most of its runtime, jam-packed with plot. The show stumbles, however, when the two leads have the obligatory, I don't know if we could be together so I'm going to mope dramatically off in the corner, falling out in the third act. The story doesn't come to a screeching halt necessarily, we are still following some of the side characters and their subplots, but it definitely feels like it does because the story between the two leads comes to a screeching halt. And this subplot spans multiple episodes, because they split it so that Oh Yeon-so learns that she was involved with the death of her parents. Oh, sorry, I guess spoiler warning for very obvious plot developments that if you wanted to, you could probably guess by the end of the first episode or two. Maybe sooner. Probably. Which she first grapples with, and then she works through her feelings around the fact that they were going to see An Jae-hyun. As soon as she works through this, though, An Jae-hyun finds out about it, and he has to deal with it too. And on top of that tells her, if you stay, I won't let you leave tonight. And she's suddenly unsure how she feels?
들어갈래? 지금 들어가면 오늘 안 보낼 건데. 너 집에 안 보낸다고. 그래도 들어갈래?
And I think the creators were trying to make her fully commit and take the relationship serious, but it doesn't come out that way because she would already have had to be serious to have made the choice she did because of how long she agonized over what to do. Also, it's played more like her deciding if she wants to be with him or not, which doesn't make any sense because that's what we just spent the whole last episode with her doing, trying to figure out if she can or even wants to be with him anymore, knowing what she does. And it feels like this because An Jae-hyun doesn't agonize over this and thinks he shouldn't be with her, but this isn't him deliberating over what to do and is ultimately meaningless because he makes it clear that he'll be with her if she's serious about being with him. And as soon as she makes herself clear, for the second time, he jumps into the relationship again with no hesitation.
집에 안 가. 너랑 있을 거야. 같이 있자, 강우야.
And if this sounds like pointless circular conflict that changes nothing, moves the plot along not at all, or even develops the characters or their relationship, that's because it is all of those things. And yeah, while it should have developed their relationships, the impact of these revelations are diluted by everything else happening or not happening as the case may be. So, what was the point of any of this? Having her parents' death and the fact that they were going to see An Jae-hyun be a plot point in their relationship is fine. And of course the characters need to deal with this information, but does it really need to be dragged out like this? The show is a romantic comedy. Its premise is that the female lead hates all good-looking men and is cartoonishly prejudiced against them because of her life after living with her absurdly good-looking brothers.
빨랑 이실직고 안 하면 이 사실 확 올려버린다. 이 꼴을 보고도 걔네들이 좋아라 하는지 한번 두고 보자고. 진짜.
All of whom she actually has very healthy relationships with. Like, the central conflict for much of the show is that Oh Yeon-so doesn't like An Jae-hyun because he's traditionally good looking and she can't get past that.
잘생긴 남자는 싫대요.
예?
잘생겼어 싫대.
아이 진짜! 그렇게 싫으면 나를 주는 새끼야!
I didn't tune in to watch these characters randomly suffer for hours on end. I want them to get into wacky hijinks while swooning at each other. Basically, I just came to have a good time. And if you can't give these characters satisfactory arcs without resorting to tragedy or angsty drama, why are you creating a comedy anything? But the real issue is this problem is not constrained to this one show. It's attached to many K-dramas, and I cannot even begin to count how many of them I've stopped watching at that 8 to 12 episode point because of the tonal shift from light comedy to tragedy serious drama for their third act, effectively making it feel like a different show and relying on extended shots of the actors looking sad rather than actually, telling a story. But what's interesting to me is the show What's Wrong with Secretary Kim actually has almost the opposite problem. The show is definitely a comedy romance, there's no doubt about that, but it's less silly than a show like Love with Flaws, and it actually does a better job of weaving its darker moments through the beginning. The show has a subplot that very much falls in the thriller category as our two leads. Again, spoiler warning for very obvious plot development.
쉬었습니다, 부회장님. 괜찮으세요? 난 거미가 싫어요. 공중에 매달린 거미만 보면 진짜 기절할 것처럼 싫다고요. 누구나 죽을 만큼 싫어하는 거 하나쯤은 있잖아요.
Were kidnapped when they were kids, and we slowly learn about what happened to them and how they got kidnapped as the show goes on. On top of the show's ability to better frame its more serious moments, there's a constant sense of progression propelled by these dark moments as the characters are trying to recover their memories. And what we learn from these memories helps to develop the characters more and their relationships. It actually works well because of the development, and because it helps move the plot forward. Until we hit episode 12, when the subplot ends. And you just heard that right. If you haven't seen this show before, the thriller subplot, the main subplot of the show, is wrapped up in episode 12. 4 whole episodes before the end of the show. And if you're wondering, no, nothing from the thriller subplot comes back for the rest of the show. There's no third act twist, the person who kidnapped them doesn't reappear, nobody snaps from the truth coming out, or anything else that would make sense to happen in a story. It's just wrapped up nicely with a bow on top and we just move on from it.
제대로 살 수 있는 기회를 뺏어버려서 미안해.
넌 내가 용서가 돼?
용서하고 말고 할 것도 없잖아. 그러니까 형도 힘들겠지만 괴로움 다 내려놓고 편해졌으면 좋겠어. 내가 아닌 형 자신을 위해서.
미안하다.
So you might be wondering, what happens for the last quarter of the show? Pure, unadulterated fluff. And that's it. Nothing else. Well, I mean, there is some angst and drama, but for the most part, there's not actually a story. The two leads have already gotten together, so we're just seeing them be together and then get married. And I am not opposed to fluff. It'd be pretty hard for me to be a Park Seo-joon fan and not like fluff, and I do happen to really like it when it's done well. A good example of fluff done well in another Park Seo-joon show is She Was Pretty, which did actually have some pushback because pretty much the last half of the last episode was the denouement, which was entirely fluff.
아, 김혜진 변했어. 왕년에 뽀뽀맨이야 아니었나?
오늘 마감이란 말이야. 이따 실컷 해줄게. 나 노트북 뚜껑 덮었는데.
And for those who don't know what a denouement is, it is basically the outcome of the story. It's after the climax of the rising action, pretty much the resolution, when everything has happened and we see things settle down. Quote author Mary Robinette Kowal, usually when you reach the end of a novel, you have some sort of new status quo, some sort of new thing, and you want to experience that. So denouements for rom-coms being full of fluff between the main characters makes sense. And I like a good lengthy denouement from romances because I have just consumed far too many where the story ends once the characters get together, and we don't really get to enjoy them being a couple. So I'm here for denouements like the one in She Was Pretty, which is just so indulgent. However, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing, and that was the issue with What's Wrong with Secretary Kim. And they really should have known better when creating the show because it didn't spring fully formed from the screenwriter's head, but instead is an adaptation of a webcomic. Now, webcomics are serialized fiction, and sometimes what will happen with serialized fiction is a story will complete narratively, but the author doesn't realize or doesn't care, and keeps posting anyway, so the story just keeps going long after it should have stopped. The benefit of adapting a work that has that issue, however, is that you can cut all of it out. I'm not saying it'd be easy, however, any sort of effort towards that end would have been better than having a 4-hour-long denouement. Actually, I take that back. So little plot-wise happens in those episodes because they are in fact the denouement, which is not something I want missed, that whatever couldn't have been moved up or consolidated could have easily been cut and it wouldn't have mattered. Like, Seriously, the preview for the final episode has such clear fake outs for tension and drama that are so low stakes, that are just so obviously fake. It just really shows how much the story needed to have already ended.
우리 집에 웬일이야?
왜 그럴까?
뭐라고?
김미소가 왜 그럴까?
저 이렇게는 결혼 못 하겠습니다.
And I genuinely loved this show, but once I finished it, I actually cheered because it was finally over. The monster was finally dead, and I was free to move on with my life. Right after I made this video complaining about it. So, how long should a K-drama usually be? Well, I think having a usual length is the wrong way to approach this issue from the beginning. Different stories require different amounts of time to be told, and while with television, shows like these are always going to be told in hour and a half long increments, and I am including shows that air 2 half-hour episodes a day, 4 in a week, because those are still structured like hour-long episodes with commercial breaks written in. That doesn't mean that they need to always be told with the same number of episodes. I'm not saying too many things need to be shaken up either. Right now, K-dramas air 2 episodes a week, so they all have an even number of episodes. And while that can definitely prove to be problematic as well, I don't think it's a stretch to say it's substantially less problematic than constantly having a set number for the entire series. Especially because it always feels like the writers have a small story that they try to develop and flesh out to take up more time because they're more scared of trying to cram too much in than they are of not having enough. If there's too much, then plot threads get dropped or not handled well, but if there's extra time, then you can just cut scenes longer, or include long shots of the actors looking sad in different places from different angles for an entire episode or two. So I'm not saying we need to upend the entire current system and completely reformat how K-dramas are structured as a whole. I'm just saying maybe only make shows as long as they need to be. No longer, no shorter. As the showrunner for Supernatural once said, I think we're all really hopeful of getting to episode 300. We think it would be a really awesome milestone. Could it go beyond that? Creatively? Yes, I think it could. But just because something could, doesn't mean it should.
어딨어? 어딨냐고! 어딨냐니까! 어딨어! 내가 우리 영준 오빠 분명히 일로 들어오는 거 봤단 말이야!
오지란 씨, 부회장님 이미 30분 전쯤에 나가셨어요. 못 보셨어요?
못 봤어!
못 보고 뭐 하셨어요?
SNS 업데이트 하느라 기다림이란 사랑이란 뭘까?